Backstory, just so people know how Aaron and I met. It was actually at DLAC, and Aaron was in a room that I snuck into in order to take a call. And one thing led to another. We just started kind of chit-chatting, and it led to a follow-up Zoom call, which then led to multiple Zoom calls. And they've got something really special with Unrulr. So I'm excited to have Aaron share that with you as our Curated for You reminder. The Curated for You section is new, and this is something that I've gone through, and I've asked a lot of the questions to make sure this is a real thing, right? It's not a passing fad that is cool today, but then no one will hear about it tomorrow. I've done my due diligence in digging in and making sure that A, it's legit, and then B, that it's something that I think that our group could use. And I really do think that this is important and interesting. So I wanted to make sure to bring him in and have him talk about Curated for You with Unrulr. So Aaron, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I know you're going to talk a little bit about it. We're pretty informal today, so we might just jump in with questions mid-stride. Apologies if that happens, but that's kind of how we're rolling. So with no further ado, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Honored to be here. As many questions as possible. At some point, can you give me the ability to share a screen, and then I can kind of talk about it and demo it too. Unrulr is a tool that I used first as an educator. I was a K-12 capstone coordinator. It's kind of dream job in Waimea on the Big Island of Hawaii, managing capstone courses in 5th, 8th, and 12th grade. These really beautiful project-based learning experiences. And I was grappling with having students create authentic portfolios of learning. We hadn't moved to purely competency-based learning, but I wanted their process and their reflections to be just as sacred as the products they were creating. And I also wanted an ability for communal learning. It's really influenced by a book called An Ethic of Excellence by Ron Berger, where he talked about artifacts of learning, student work that could be just as powerful as something a teacher delivers. And because I was in Hawaii, there's this culture of community learning where learners are teaching each other and they're not just sitting behind a desk. And so I came across this tool and it completely revolutionized the way I was thinking about teaching, and joined this company as a way to scale my vision of a more learner-centered education, where they kind of shifted from passive to active in their learning journey, and quickly saw its use with adults as well, both in schools as a great kind of community of practice or professional learning community tool, but also in nonprofits, where nonprofits were trying to look at actual evidence of what they do, not just for Marcom, but for their own evolution. And met Chase in DLAC, I think was on a call similar to this, looked up and just had a kind of authentic conversation about what we were embarking on. And so we have a product that fits beautifully into this landscape of visible learning, competency-based learning. There's a lot of buzzwords: deeper learning, project-based learning. But we've seen fit in traditional institutions, kind of near and far. We're in over 40 schools, a number of nonprofits, schools that are in the Big Picture Learning Network, so public schools across the country, independent schools, charter schools, and then again, nonprofits that are trying to show different forms of qualitative data, not just having the same kind of BS Google form that captures their work, but really rich kind of multimedia data too. Chase, shall I share my screen and kind of talk about it a little bit more through that?
Absolutely. I would love for them to be able to see that. You should be able to share now.
I'm good to go. So I often call Unrulr Humans of New York in education. If you've ever seen that beautiful storytelling product, the ability for learners to have agency over the modality and multimedia they choose, and also, just a much more nuanced way of capturing what they're working on, who they are, their process. As I've worked with people in the education technology space, which I am new to, they've called Unrulr a process portfolio or a reflection portfolio. Not only are learners able to capture what they're working on week to week, but also how they're growing. And, there's this real power in video and audio that allows them to capture what's really been hard, kind of the real moments of learning. What makes our tool super unique is the ability for any learning community, whether it be a nonprofit, whether it be a small school or a large school, to take their KPIs, their competencies, their skills, values. We call them COGS, concepts, outcomes, goals, or skills, because we have no idea what to call them. But anything that you want to track, anything that you want evidence of, you can create sets of these. And every time learners in your community are posting, they're tagging that post one of these. And in the language of higher ed, this is called coding. Usually a researcher has to code their research at the end of the experience. But in Unrulr, a learner, whether they're a teacher, a student, or someone at a nonprofit, is able to tag their work based on the competency that their organization is trying to track. And you can bespoke these to as many of these private learning communities as you want. And this has been huge. Our goal is to kind of localize assessment and to localize the ability to track what you think is important. And that's really what's kind of gained us big traction as well. One of the things I really grappled with in project-based learning and just learning in general was creating too many milestones and killing off the agency for my learners. And so we've designed this kind of feature with an Unrulr called a journey, where a learner is able to do the metacognition, choosing previous posts that they've created and turn them into this really beautiful narrative or journey. And we've seen schools really freak out about this, and nonprofits as well, because their learners are now able to capture summatively, what they've been working on formatively. Unrulr is both a mobile app. We've tried to design a UX and UI that's similar to how our learners, whether they're teenagers or adults, already document their lives. And in our equity research, we found that more students have access to mobile devices than they do to computers. But we also have an incredibly similar UX and UI in our web browser, which I'm going to share with you as well. No matter what tool our learners use, we want them to still have this kind of great Unrulr experience. It works through single sign-on or SSO, just taking the login credentials and of the student in the school. And your home feed in Unrulr is like the front page of Reddit. All of the learning communities that you're a part of, you have kind of right there and then. And the power of that is that you can provide a comment quickly. One of the hardest things to do in any learning community is giving feedback before it's too late and kind of making that authentic. And that's been a core part of this kind of asynchronous tool that Unrulr has become for learning communities. When you hit search, you're able to drive in to a specific private community with permission to share. This is an awesome school in Kansas City, Missouri, Notre Dame de Sion, that's using Unrulr. And when I hit filter, this is what they were trying to track. These are their COGS. This is their portrait of a graduate, their learner success outcomes. And in Unrulr, they built the icons. They created the language, that great kind of sentence or blurb that goes along with what collaborative team player means at Sion. But you could take anything. You could take Texas's CTE standards and turn them into COGS. You could take the UN SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. You could take your core values as an institution. And every time a learner is posting, they're doing that metacognition of and critical thinking of tagging it. But you can also filter. You can say, I want to see all the examples of these 2 competencies, and then only see those posts. You can drill down and click on trends and see over 3 months, 6 months, each of these icons represents the number of posts that was tagged with these. Click into one, see all of the posts that represent that as well. It's our way of getting institutions and schools to be able to take some of that qualitative data and turn it into quantitative data. And there's a way to micro-credential with an Unrulr as well. You can take a post and you can say, this totally represents humble difference maker, or you're not quite there yet. And all of that data is saved. So, I think one of the places we're playing in is that competency-based learning, mastery transcript consortium world. But a lot of the schools and organizations that use it are just trying to have different evidence of learning as well. When you hit self in Unrulr, you have this living and breathing portfolio of learning. And it's where me as a learner, all of my posts live. And I, Chase, like we were talking about this before, like I geek out over a school where a 9th grader starts using Unrulr. And by the time they graduate, they have hundreds of posts and data points that they can use for college, for internships and jobs, but also the school understands who the learner is, right? Like a lot of the data that's coming out post-COVID and pandemic is about youth who don't feel like they belong in schools, who don't feel seen. And for us, we're trying to be a panacea for part of that, for institutions to actually be able to differentiate to their learners, and for learners to kind of have these, portfolios or journals of their use. What we're seeing is it becomes a culture tool with institutions. As learners are posting and tagging they're kind of diving into what they've achieved, whether they're visiting, a really awesome place like me visiting the D School, or they're kind of reflecting on a project or a product that they're working on. So social entrepreneurship program I run in Hawaii. And that journey piece, that ability to take multiple posts and turn it into a journey has been really, really powerful as kind of a midway point or end product of a month-long sprint or the end of the year. There's this incredible ability in Unrulr with the right security settings to be able to publish a post, to be able to take a post that was in this community and turn it into a hyperlink that anyone can kind of view outside of the institution as well. And this has allowed learners to work with subject matter experts from outside of the school. It's created this really cool environment where they're sharing their work, not just at the end of the experience, but throughout. And there's this ability, Chase, do you see these white globes in the top right of many of these posts of mine? These are posts that I've published. I can unpublish and publish at any point in time. And when I hit this green globe at the top, I'm able to create not just a post that's public, but I'm able to curate a public portfolio. And I've always been obsessed with allowing learners to engage with the outside world. And just being able for them to connect all of these pieces is really, really powerful too. And so, we're trying to have learners be able to share out, process and reflection. And at the same time, we're trying to make that learning important, across the institution. So would love to answer questions. There's a lot more to show, doing the kind of quick shotgun approach to a demo. And it's been really beautiful to find fit in philanthropy and nonprofits as well, for an organization to take their KPIs and turn them into tags or cogs and show evidence throughout, and fight that kind of annual report mentality of showing what they're doing and really build it into.
It feels initially like, everyone wants to talk about all the cool things in education, and we've got all these buzzwords, and we love to talk about competency-based learning. But up until now, it seems like there's been a huge missing piece of the puzzle, where we could gauge it, but how do we showcase that they've actually mastered the topic versus, okay, they passed the test? Two very different things here. It seems to me, Aaron, like Unrulr provides an avenue for, whatever it is, whether it's a school or company, nonprofit, whatever, to showcase these are things that are truly mastered. This is something that we've curated, that the students have curated, right? They've owned a piece of their learning, but it gives the ability for us to stamp that competency-based piece versus just guess at it. Am I off base? Like, that's what it just seems like to me initially.
Yeah, I think I'm searching for undeniable evidence, right? And I think it's easier to do that in video and multimedia and modality. We're working with Angela Stockman. She's incredible. She's at Damon University. She writes a ton about documentation, and she's using Unrulr in her undergrad class, kind of meta usage of an ed tech tool. And what she's really excited about is actually differentiating to learners. And for her, she said that when we just have writing assignments, we miss out on evidence of learning from a lot of our learners, from a lot of our students. And so she's excited about Unrulr because it gives that choice from the beginning. And if there's time, there's this really beautiful example where a student is talking about who she is and where she comes from. And she created a video of her ranching cattle. Paniolo culture, like cowgirl, cowboy culture, is huge on the Big Island of Hawaii. Second largest ranch after King Ranch in Texas in the world is on the Big Island. And she said, I would have never been able to write about this, right? And as a native Hawaiian, she said, I don't feel comfortable like doing my Brene Brown circle sit where I share my 3 words about who I am. But video was really easy for her. And so I think for us, it's all about reducing friction to documentation, to storytelling and evidence. And I came into this with like huge imposter syndrome, right? I'm at a school that's kind of schizophrenic, like most independent schools, talks about APs or talks about deeper learning and project-based learning, but like touts how many APs they have at their school, right? And I was trying to change that. I needed evidence that in this capstone program that I was doing, we were actually learning. It was actually grit. It was actually that word rigor, right? Like, and so Unrulr became that possibility for me. It allowed me to share out not only the creation of incredible products or businesses that they were working on, but like that process that they were going through. And we're working with this cool big picture learning school in Ukiah, California. And the student presented for 20 minutes. It was a 45-minute presentation, super awkward pause. And then the teacher said, go log into Unrulr, show everyone what you did. And the room was in tears. Like the student was able to show everyone what they learned and their process. And even though the product wasn't successful, like what they grappled with and how they grew. And I think that's like a holy grail in education that we're trying to make kind of more visible. So sorry, super long answer to a precise question.
No problem, man. That's great. So you, through this example so far, have given us something like, for instance, Tamara, who has a micro school. I could see, and you've talked about how this could be applied into hers. But how about maybe like for Leah? She has a product company in the education space. Can you give an example of another Unrulr use case where it is more on that business or nonprofit side of the world, and how are people using it in that instance?
It's a great point. Like, so what we realized fairly early on was there's a really cool B2B fit with Unrulr, because Unrulr is a community building tool. And so whether it's an educational consulting practice, a PD, outfit, or a business is trying to show its impact, Unrulr has become this really great fit in there. And so we've seen institutions like Kupaho, which is one of the coolest teacher training programs. They do deeper learning PD across the world. They white labeled Unrulr. They made the app look like it was theirs. And it became their before, during, and after consulting tool. Before, learners, in this case teachers or consultees, were answering questions about who they are, where they come from, what fuels them. And they were also able to deliver content through prompts, which are like discussion boards in Unrulr. During, Unrulr was their documentation tool, right? So the culture, the work, everything was being documented through multimedia, through writing, through those tags. And they were able to take their competencies, their KPIs, whatever you want to call them, OKRs, like whatever they were trying to track, right? And their learners were tagging. But what was really cool was afterwards, it became a continued community building tool. Learners were still able to communicate, to cross-pollinate across the different schools that were there in really meaningful spaces. And so we see great fit. There's a really cool micro lending nonprofit on the Big Island of Hawaii that used Unrulr and got rid of their annual report. They said, they wrote in the MOA, you will not be doing an annual report. You will be doing 3 Unrulr posts a month that document what you're working on. And they created this like incubator accelerator culture amongst all the people they gave loans to. And they were helping each other, right? The finance person was helping the marketing person at a different nonprofit. And then also they were displaying evidence that now this nonprofit is able to take to its funders like Kauffman or Gates or Hawaii Community Foundation and say, this is what we're doing. Like, do you see this post? It doesn't matter that the audio isn't great or that the lighting isn't good. Like, do you hear the authenticity of like how our program changed their lives? Like, that's what we're trying to kind of build in. And then we're also trying to build in this culture of documentation and this culture of storytelling. Like right now I'm at Hillbrook School. I'm their entrepreneur in residence. They're using Unrulr K-12. They're also using Unrulr in their Scott Center for Social Entrepreneurship. And I just got out of a meeting like a minute ago where we're like, okay, let's use it as a leadership team, right? Let's document the work that we're doing. Let's model its usage as we bring it down the kind of chain. So again, I think it's just, what do you want to track? Like, how do you want to actually show evidence of it? Those are the places that we play in.
It's great, man. The thing I just love about it is how simple it is. There's nothing like difficult about it. It's just very simple. Other people on the call, what questions do you have for Aaron? Tilly?
I love what you said about how simple it is, Chase, and anything technology related. My first question is always, what's the kind of onboarding tutorial time commitment on the educator side or the admin side and the business or organization? And then what kind of time commitment for your students or your users?
Zero onboarding with middle school and high school students. And that's not an exaggeration. It looks and feels like how they document their lives. And for the most part, it's the same with teachers. I was a teacher for over a decade, and I hated those PDs where an ed tech company came in. And so I took that lesson into this job. I still failed. Like getting 40 teachers to download an app on their computers or phone is like the kiss of death, because it's not going to work for some. Teachers don't like to look, dumb in front of other teachers, though they're never dumb, right? Like they don't want to not be able to utilize it. So our onboarding occurs before synchronous. Usually a synchronous onboarding is 30 minutes at most. And onboarding is not just technical, it's also pedagogical, right? Like the hardest onboarding for us is cultures of reflection, capturing process, making it authentic so it doesn't feel weird. Like even in the coolest learning communities, it's still weird for some other students to be like, wait, I'm in charge of my learning? Like, what do you mean you want me to document? What do you mean? What's a scrum? Like, what do you mean you want me to do a check-in every single week? And so what we're really good at, because we're teachers, is the pedagogy of the tool and the shift that it can create within learning communities. John Nash, who uses it at the University of Kentucky, he just has weekly prompts. Weekly prompts that are video. And all he wants is video responses from his learners, because he wants displays of metacognition and muscle memory. He wants to build into his learning community the ability to reflect. And so that took onboarding. But in terms of the tool itself, like not overselling it, a little, the back end, the admin side is just as simple as the front end. You're creating essentially a roster, you're creating your cogs, and then we just help every organization kind of where they're at. And so we see amazing fit in micro schools, like organizations like Vela, which funds them, and also other spaces. We see fit in districts, amazing schools in Colorado, public schools that are using Unrulr. And then we see fit in independent schools, where they're agile, they're quick, they're easy. To be honest with you, I also write for Getting Smart as a columnist in education. The most exciting things in education are happening in public schools, not even close. Like the most innovative, real world learning, CTE programs, social entrepreneurship, it's all public schools, because the privilege of independent schools has really gotten in the way of them innovating. And so that's where we want to be. We want to be in places that don't have access. We want to be in places that have access. We just want to be a tool that allows them to better tell the story of their learners. Yeah. Sorry, you're catching me in long answer response, but
awesome. Any other questions for Aaron? All right, Aaron, I know that, again, there are more people watching the recording than are watching
live. Awesome.
For those people who are watching the recording, how do they get a question to you? What is the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, unrulr.com, UNRULR.com, confusingly spelled. You can reach me at aaron@unrulr.com. There's a scheduling link on the website as well. You can follow me on Instagram, where I'm more active. Schornado, SCHORNADO. My students nickname me based on my last name. We're in that really beautiful stage as a growing company where we want to work with a diversity of really great organizations in education. So please reach out, to get the kind of formal demo, but, also to see, how it fits kind of the use cases in your learning community too. You can find me on LinkedIn as well.
And I think it's important to say here, we scratched the surface and covered about this much of what Unrulr can do, because you and I have been in multiple conversations and gone through lots of demos, and I've asked lots of questions along the way, and we didn't even get into half the stuff that we talked about. So if this is interesting to you, please find Aaron and schedule more time to really dig in with him. He's super easy to dig into with. So I will make sure to include all the links that you just gave, Aaron, with the show notes and send them out to members. And then people watching the recording, feel free to reach out to Aaron. Really appreciate you giving us some of your time. And again, you're welcome to hang out, but I know you're out of school, so you probably need to run and get back in the classroom now that we're 8 minutes over when I told you we'd be done. So I apologize for that, but appreciate you being here today.
You're good. I'm super grateful for the amplification. We're a company that's avoiding venture capital for as long as we can, just to give you some inside baseball. And it's all about, growing through revenue and meeting more amazing educators. And so any chance to get to talk to your network is a huge gift. Thanks, Chase.